It's that time of year again. The Toronto Blue Jays are checking in on every free agent in Major League Baseball, and they've started to get a short list here of some high quality names that could definitely help the team heading into next season. So I'll break down some of those potential targets and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in everybody to Jays Digest. I'm your host Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Goss. And Nick, it's that time of year again where it's sort of the midpoint of the off season, I should say. Like we're not quite there at the mid at the winter meetings, and we're not really in signing time. Although we have seen some signings and some trades since the World Series concluded. We probably won't see the big names signed until closer to the winter meetings, and I think that's okay for the Blue Jays' sake. But there's a lot of work to be done that's been very well documented, and a lot of these names that we're going to discuss today could fill some glaring holes that the Blue Jays have on their roster because, boy, are there some glaring holes on that roster.
Yeah, a lot of reports are coming out. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of different names the Jays are being linked to. So we're gonna dive into a couple of them today, and we're gonna start with the biggest one, and that's gonna be the focus of the video. So Ben Nicholson-Smith dropped an article, and again, at this time of year, they usually do. Chai Davidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith drop their articles prior to the winter meetings, and again, they have the GM meetings now, so they're starting to get some idea of who the Jays are targeting. So these are actual reports from talking to the GMs rather than the speculation that's been happening for the past few months, but. The Blue Jays check in lots of players this time of year. Most sign with the Jays, or most won't sign with the Jays. Some do, highlighting their interest in starting pitching. One player in whom they have some interest in is Max Fried, and they basically dive into the article. Says the best guess to the Blue Jays this winter is they add a pretty good hitter, a starting pitcher who bumps Yariel Rodriguez to the bullpen, and some further relief depth. And there's some other things within this article I want to get into, but while there's risk of reading too much into early offseason conversations, it's worth noting the Jays are asking about Max Fried, the 30-year-old left-hander who posted a 3.25 ERA with Atlanta last season. And here are his stats in case you're unfamiliar. Peter, Max Fried, they're targeting him and they're looking into him. And he's a pretty high-profile starter, and they haven't been doing this in previous off seasons. They haven't really went for the super high-profile name. Obviously, they signed Kevin Gausman 3 years ago, but what are your thoughts on Max Fried? I think he would honestly be a very good fit for this Blue Jays team, but there is going to be a lot of teams that are going for a left-hander who has yet to have really a bad season in the major leagues in his handful of in his 7 years here. So this is pretty exciting that they're at least targeting profile players or players of this high profile, and I like the start.
Yeah, and first off, for Max Fried, I mean, this guy's nasty.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And like you mentioned, Nick, hasn't really had a bad season in the major leagues. And another thing that I look at is the consistency of how many innings he's pitching every year. The only outlier I would say is 2023,
Yeah.
where he dealt with some injuries and he wasn't able to stay on the field for the bulk of the season there. But yeah, at 30 years old, lefty with the stuff that he has, I definitely think that should be a target that the Blue Jays key in on, especially because they lost Yusei Kikuchi at the deadline, and they could use a lefty in that rotation right now. Like there isn't one at the moment. There isn't a reliable lefty in the rotation that is at the moment. So I could definitely see this happening, but again, we've been saying this many times, and we've been sticking to our guns with this take that nothing happens unless Vladdy is signed long term. And I think that is the number one key to this offseason. Of course, there are some great players out there that are going to bring you a lot closer to the playoffs alongside Vladdy, alongside Bo. But signing Vladdy and showing other free agents that you're interested in, that you want to be competitive, not just for this season, but for years to come, I think that's going to help you a lot in some of those sweepstakes, whether it be the Max Fried sweepstakes, the Anthony Santander sweepstakes, showing that you have a core that is built, that is going to be together for a long time. I think that is the recipe. Like it, just put yourself in the shoes of a free agent, Nick. Like if you're a high profile free agent and you're on the hook for, let's say a 7 to 10 year deal, why would you sign with an organization whose farm system is bottom tier, whose best players are going to be hitting free agency in 1 year's time, whose pitching staff is aging? There are a lot of red flags with the Toronto Blue Jays if I'm a free agent and want to sign with them. Let's not kid ourselves here. A lot of red flags. But I think some of those red flags start to dissipate if you sign Vladdy long term and you have that 25-year-old generational talent, one of the best offensive players in baseball, locked up as the foundation of your ball club. I think that eases the mind of free agents that are potentially going to come in and spend the rest of their careers in Toronto alongside one of the best hitters in baseball.
Yeah, and they dive into that a little bit here as well. And you see this here. They want to spend big, and beyond locking up Guerrero, the Jays need to upgrade their offense in a notable way, and they have opportunities to improve the run-scoring environment, which sounds exactly like something Ross Atkins would say, because he did say that, and he suggested corner outfield was a logical place, and outside of Soto, you have Santander, you have some other guys, and we'll have other videos, of course, diving into that, but yeah, in order to get a guy like Max Fried, and whether that's Max Fried, whether that's even guys like Santander or some of the other free agents, they need to lock up Vladdy, and that needs to be the priority number one. And they don't have that within this article because, of course, at this point, they're focusing more on who they can add rather than who they can maintain and keep. But it gets a little bit interesting. And again, this is an interesting point here from another article. It says after talking to executives and agents at the GM meetings, connecting with free agents has been a priority for the Blue Jays since most top agencies have representatives here in San Antonio. But Toronto front office is also surveying the trade market. So there's just a lot of things going on right now, and we know there's another article that dropped surrounding how with Rogers now they have a new, structure of how with their new TV deal and all these things that they're willing to pay big. You can see this here. I think the Blue Jays are in a new state, being with Edward Rogers. And being where he is and the commitment to sports in total, I think as a businessman for his operation and communications, he's a behemoth in the sport. So basically, they go on to say that they should have no problem locking up Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They have all the money in the world, and that was an article by Schneider. I've been saying this about Toronto for years, and now with the recent consolidation of hockey and basketball and soccer, I would imagine he probably wants to be involved in more, which would mean, hopefully, locking up Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which is something that desperately needs to happen. But yeah, Max Fried would fit like a glove, but there needs to be incentive for some of these players to come here. Maybe a Soto Guerrero punch would be ideal, but again, it seems like the Mets and the Yankees are favorites at this point. But there's still a lot of updates and rumors going around on that front. So
Yeah, and you should still be in on Juan Soto. There's no doubt if you're the Toronto Blue Jays. But like we mentioned previously, Nick, that you need to have contingency plans and you need to have a backup plan. So if you don't get Juan Soto, which in all likelihood you probably won't, Anthony Santander is not a bad option to fall back on. The guy was top five in home runs in Major League Baseball. So I definitely think that is someone that the Blue Jays could look to add and could help with a lot of the issues that were plaguing them this year offensively. And another thing that I wanted to mention quickly on Max Fried is that it feels to me that it's more of a secondary move. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like this is the move that you make when everything else has fallen into
yeah,
place already. And I'm talking about you sign Vladdy long term, you bring in a big bat like an Anthony Santander, and then you're ready to compete, but you're that one arm away from feeling really good about your rotation. I think that's what Max Fried would be to this Blue Jays team. Now, I'm not saying he would probably be the ace on the Toronto Blue Jays. He would probably be their best starting pitcher, but it feels like a move that you make a little bit later in the offseason if he's still available, because you have some other needs that are, I think, at the top of your priority list. Whereas your starting pitching, I think, could be fine with a minor addition, considering the names that you already have in that five-man rotation. So I like Max Fried, but it feels more so like a luxury right now. And if everything works out the way that it needs to work out for the Blue Jays, it would be an item that I think puts them closer to the top or maybe even over the top. Who knows?
yeah. Hitting is obviously their priority, and then if they want to, I think they're going to focus on targeting an elite hitter rather than an elite pitcher. But if both fall into place, a offseason including a great hitter in Max Fried and then some bullpen arms could be very good for the Toronto Blue Jays. So let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. Rumors are circulating. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. See you guys tomorrow.